What's going on, everyone? Just caught episode 3 of Paolo Sorrentino's phenomenal show, The Young Pope, on HBO. I think this was the best episode yet. After episode 2 of my previous video, I mentioned that I was a little worried that we were going to see the show kind of descend into a scenario where it's just kind of the ongoing madman antics of Lenny acting like a crazy person. But as we see in this episode, there's a true method to his madness. He has very specific goals and objectives, and his wildly disturbing homily in the previous episode is all part of furthering those goals. And this is kind of like the rock and roll episode because it's got a lot of great rock and roll music, like All on the Watchtower during the credits, but you really get to see him become almost kind of a mysterious rock star within the church in terms of bragging about how he's more handsome than Jesus and things like that. I was waiting for the episode that would totally lock me in as a fan of the show, and this definitely was that. Now, before I go any further, I should say I'm going to be doing more of a recap than a review, so go watch the episode if you plan on watching the rest of this video because I can't avoid spoilers moving forward. Episode begins with a very revealing scene with Lenny talking to Gutierrez. Gutierrez seems to be the one person that he doesn't abuse just because Gutierrez is just willing to listen. And Lenny admits how during the election process, how he just kept saying to himself, or praying, he was praying so hard that he thought he was going to shit himself, that he knew he could be more useful than the rest of the candidates. And he just kept saying, not them, but me, not them, me. And he basically admits to Gutierrez, he says, I love myself more than my neighbor. I love myself more than God. I am the Lord omnipotent. I mean, these are some pretty blasphemous comments on his part. And it just shows how he views himself to be infallible. He views himself to be divine. The really interesting part of this episode is seeing how, rather than backtrack from his controversial homily, Pius XIII seems to be doubling down. He refuses to talk to the press. He refuses to explain anything he means. When he sends Sister Mary, a.k.a. Diane Keaton, out into the world for a press conference to clarify his comments, she essentially states, I'm infallible. It's not my job to explain myself to people who are incapable of understanding me. You have to come to me. I'm not going to come to you. And in private, he essentially admits that he wants people to suffer in order to come to the church the same way he suffered, which leads to a really, really great confrontation between Spencer and Lenny, where Spencer essentially says, you're still that child, that orphan, standing at the gates of the orphanage, mad at the world for your parents abandoning you, and now you're trying to subject the rest of the world into enduring the same hardships that you did in order to get to where you got. He says essentially that's going to make you a terrible pope, maybe the worst ever, and potentially dangerous. So I love seeing Spencer as one of the few people in Lenny's life who can really dress him down and speak the truth to him, so on and so forth. At least in terms of this episode, it seems like for now, both Voyello and Spencer have been subdued and or defeated, because Voyello might be getting deposed because he had the audacity to raise his voice and scream fuck and that sort of thing when he was arguing with the Pope. And Spencer tries to accept the position of prefect for the congregation of the clergy, and Lenny turns him down and says that position's already been filled. And when he meets with a bunch of bishops who express their fears and concerns that all their congregations are upset and nervous and scared and so on and so forth, Lenny essentially describes how he felt like the Roman Catholic Church was at its most powerful in the past when it was feared, not when they were accommodating. So rather than kind of bending with the winds and being welcoming to all and explaining to all and trying to be kind of a soft and fuzzy version of the church, he wants to be feared and mysterious and aloof, and he believes that that'll help the church have more power. It's a very Machiavellian way to go about things. He's running it almost like a gangster as opposed to a priest, but who knows? I don't know where the season's going to go, whether or not he'll totally fail in his goals or if he'll be vindicated by some massive influx of new people, because you have this one character played by Ludovine Sagnier, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and she's was completely moved by the homily and totally blown away. And when she comes to explain to the Pope how moved she was, and when he asks her to explain how she perceived it, and she makes her explanation, it makes Lenny pass out in her arms. He has this wild dream sequence where he sees his parents abandoning him, and in the dream sequence we get a little taste of the great Paolo Sorrentino camera movements. If you've seen The Great Beauty, you know that he's capable of some of the wildest camera moves of any director alive, and so we get a little taste of that cinematic flourish that he's capable of in that dream. So the episode draws to a close with a really interesting confrontation. I mean, for me, the only reason I keep watching this, I like watching the maneuvers between the priests against one another, kind of the jockeying for position and power and blackmailing and all that stuff. And we see Voyello confronting Gutierrez in his room. A room that's filled with stuffed animals and tons of bottles of liquor. And he essentially says that if you don't start reporting to me what your private conversations with the Pope involve, then I'm going to tell the Pope that you have a horrible alcoholism problem, and he'll send you away, and you'll be in the outside world while you're totally afraid and incapable of dealing with everyday reality. But when Gutierrez sits down with Lenny after that, Lenny has a moment of doubt where he says, sometimes I wonder whether or not my faith is in question, or I wonder whether or not she just let Voyello run everything. And Gutierrez essentially says, Voyello's the politician, you are the Pope. So clearly Gutierrez remains all in on Lenny's side, and you can tell Lenny's starting to build a little clique, because he's all, like, even as marketing expert, she seems to smile and be thrilled by all of his maneuvers, all these efforts towards being mysterious and aloof and ambiguous. She seems to believe in his long game. Whether or not it's an effective long game, who knows? But that's what's going to keep me coming back for more episodes. And luckily, HBO Now is doing 2 episodes a week, so I get to see episode 4 tomorrow, which I'm couldn't be more thrilled about. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. It's greatly appreciated. And also, if you want to hear some film talk, check out my podcast, Wrong Reel, on iTunes. I've got the notes down below in the show notes. And hope you all had a very, very pleasant weekend. Check me out on Twitter, @ColeRex, if you want to talk about whatever. And I will talk to you all later. So long.